Hello, everyone at Aspen Ideas. How are folks feeling? Good. Are you ready to have some fun? Yeah. Yes? Excellent. Well, before we get to fun, I wanted to start by getting real here just for a second. Because if you're an attendee here at Aspen Ideas, there's a decent chance that you are a very busy, very important person. The kind of people who have a very long to-do list, very optimized calendar, very complicated relationship with doing anything just for the enjoyment of it. In the quest to succeed, in the way that all the folks here try to succeed all the time, my guess is that quietly, maybe without even noticing it, the fun parts of your life have gotten deprioritized. You might just not even remember the sorts of activities that make your life truly worth living. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. I've just been watching all of your faces kind of fall a little bit as we've been talking about this. Well, today we're going to argue that this is a big problem because as you're going to hear in our conversation today with my amazing guests, the science shows that fun is serious business when it comes to our health and our happiness. And our happiness is something that I should know about. I am Dr. Laurie Santos, professor of psychology at Yale, and the host of the Happiness Lab podcast, which interestingly, if the Aspen folks are cool with it, we might try to use this as that too. So be very vocal, laugh, and communicate so that they know the audience is here. But over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be exploring why fun is so important and why successful adults in particular tend to lose their grip on it. And we're going to be talking about practical strategies we can use to all get back to it. Sound good? Yes, good. And as I said, I have two amazing guests to help me think through fun. Over here, we have Catherine Price, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and my sometimes personal partner in crime when it comes to seeking out fun. The inflatable microphones are an example of this. Catherine's bestsellers include How to Break Up with Your Phone, her most recent book for teens, The Amazing Generation, Your Guide to Fun and Freedom in a Screen-Filled World, and most relevant to this conversation, The Power of Fun. Catherine writes an awesome Substack that you should all check out entitled How to Feel Alive. Please join me in welcoming my personal guru when it comes to all things fun, Catherine Price. Further down the stage, we have the amazing Elizabeth Dunn. Liz is a professor of psychology at the University of British Columbia and the expert on the science of happiness. Her academic research explores how we can optimize time, money, technology, and most recently, and most interestingly, carbon, to promote human well-being. She's the author of Happy Money, The Science of Happier Spending, a new book co-authored with her UBC colleague Jay-Z Zhao entitled Leave the Lights On, How Joyful Decisions Can Save Our Species. Liz is my kind of academic idol when it comes to happiness, because if you're in the happiness space, you meet a lot of happiness so-called gurus, and most of them, not that happy. But Liz herself is actually incredibly happy. She practices what she preaches. One of the happiest happiness experts I know. Please welcome Liz Dunn. Okay, Catherine, since you've written most directly on fun, I wanted to start with your origin story when it came to thinking about the importance of fun. And as I understand it, your interest in this topic happened during a surprisingly unfun existential moment of screen-free downtime. Tell me about this pivotal moment and what happened next.
It's always good to start fun talks with existential malaise, so I'm glad you started there. Yeah, I had written a book called How to Break Up with Your Phone, which is what it sounds like. It's a book that gives a guide to how to create a better relationship with your phone. It was to solve my own problem because I realized I was spending more time on my phone than I wanted to. But I didn't realize I was opening up a whole new problem for myself, which is that once I had more free time, I didn't really know what to do with it. And I had a moment that Laurie's referring to where I was alone on my couch, the site of many existential crises. And my daughter, who was then a baby, was napping, and my husband was out of the house. I had this whole hour in front of me. It should have been this amazing opportunity. Should have been so excited. But we were deliberately taking a break from screens that day. We were doing a digital Sabbath, and I realized I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, honestly, the last thing I wanted to do was read a book because that's my job. And I just thought, oh my God, I like to think of myself as a self-aware person who lives fully, and I can't think of anything to do. And so I asked myself a question I asked when I was writing How to Break Up with Your Phone that I posed to you all today now, which is, what's something you say you want to do, but you supposedly don't have time for? Because what I realized is I did have time. In fact, I had this reclaimed time, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. So I said, well, I want to learn how to play the guitar. And I signed, because I play piano, I had a guitar that my grandmother had given me money for in college. So I started going to this guitar class, and I started being filled with this feeling, this unfamiliar at that stage of my life feeling, this energetic, joyful feeling. And I was like, what's the word for this? And I'm going to blame this on early parenthood that I couldn't think of the word, but the word was fun. And so I got fascinated by what is fun and how can I have more of it. And when I looked into the research on fun, I found that at that moment, if you looked it up in PubMed, the #1 hit that came up when I put fun into PubMed was putting the fun in fungi, and it was an article about toenail fungus. And the science journalist in me was like, oh, that's intriguing. I want to do something with this. And then I also realized that the definition of fun in the dictionary didn't match up to the feeling I was experiencing. So that led me to write this book, The Power of Fun, which led me and Lori to connect for a fun-tervention. And here we are today.
And so one of the things I adored about your book was that you tried to take on the hard task of defining fun, which maybe isn't so fun, but whatever, but you got to do this as a nerdy scientist looking at stuff. You did this deep dive and got hundreds and hundreds of examples of fun from people all over the world, and you tried to distill what they were experiencing in these great moments down to 3 factors, 3 parts of fun. What are these different parts?
Yeah, so fun is a feeling, first of all. It's not an activity, and different people get that feeling from different things. Like some people might find it actually quite fun to do a dorky explanation as to what is fun. When I read through the stories, I noticed that there was this profound sense of joy running through them. The details of the stories were all different, but they were so joyful. They also made me cry when I was reading them. There was something very powerful and deeply human about them. And the definition I ended up coming up with is that there are these 3 factors in play. One is playfulness. That's the hardest for adults, especially adults like us, to grasp. It doesn't mean you have to play games. It's about having a lighthearted attitude, letting your guard down, having your inner critic be silenced, and not taking yourself too seriously. That was present in play, a sense of release and letting go. Also, connection. So playfulness and connection. Connection being the feeling of having a special shared experience, normally with another person, occasionally with a dog. This was actually interestingly true even for introverts. People told me I'm a self-proclaimed introvert, but everything I told you, all the stories involved another person. And the third factor is flow, so the state you get into when you're totally actively engaged in something to the point that you lose track of time, whether it's a great conversation or you're playing a piece of music, or you can think of an athlete playing a game. That's total flow. The man who coined the term was actually studying rock climbers. So playfulness and connection and flow. And I just want to point out that flow in particular, you can't be in flow if you're distracted, which we'll get to more in a minute. And also, you can lose track of time if you're just binge watching Netflix, but that's not the same thing. That's really junk flow. True flow is when you're actively engaged and present. And I would also point out, we just came from the session on AI and loneliness, and I was thinking, can you have fun with AI? Which is a question I've actually never thought to think of till now, and I actually don't think you can, because I think there is an embodied element to this as well.
Which kind of comes out in the connection, maybe comes out in the flow part.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is our definition of fun that we're working with, the playful, connected flow. Liz, ideally all episodes of fun have these 3 ingredients, but in one of my favorite of your recent papers, you took kind of a different approach that I loved to looking at the behavioral gradients, not of fun per se, but of like having a good day. I was reminded of the Ice Cube song from back in the day, like today was a good day. You like did the paper analyzing Ice Cube's Today Was a Good Day. And so explain what the study tried to do and what you found were the ingredients in a good day.
Yeah, so we took advantage of this really amazing data set in which tens of thousands of Americans told the researchers whether they had a particularly good day. Basically, was today better than an average Friday? And fortunately, they also reported the way they spent every minute of their day. So we could actually chart how they spent the minutes of their day and how that related to whether today actually turned out to be an especially good day. And one of the things that we found was that socializing emerged as one of the most important pieces of having a good day. And so it really fits with what you're saying in terms of that power of connection. Interestingly, it turned out just having about 1 to 2 hours of socializing in a day was enough to really kind of max out that probability of having a good day.
So you got to cut it off.
Yeah, you don't have to go more. You can. It doesn't hurt, but it kind of plateaus. Although the interesting exception there was time with friends. With time with friends was almost like chocolate chips in a cookie. You can just add more and it keeps being better. So that was pretty interesting. And then again, tying in with what Catherine said, we also found one of the surprising findings in that data was that spending time on relaxing and leisure was actually associated with a lower probability of having an especially good day. And we were like, I thought my grad student analyzed the data wrong. I made him go back and look at it again. But it turned out it was about 70% of the time that people were engaged in leisure and relaxation, they were actually like watching Netflix, watching TV, and again, going to what you're saying about that sort of false flow or whatever, it wasn't actually enhancing people's likelihood of having a good day. In contrast, engaging in sports and exercise did raise the likelihood of having a good day. So really, if you want to have an especially good Friday, I mean, come to our panel on fun, but otherwise, socialize and spend time doing that more active form of leisure, of exercise and sports.
I'm curious about, just because I know we're in a group of workaholics, myself included, what about work? Did that factor in at all?
Yeah, so with work, work gets a bad reputation in happiness research. So as a happiness researcher, I've been involved in a lot of studies where we see work is not really where people feel the happiest on average. But interestingly, people could work for up to 6 hours a day with no detrimental effect on their likelihood of having an especially good day. However, once people were working more than 6 hours a day, the probability of having a really good day plummeted. So what this tells us then is that maybe work isn't so bad. I mean, I'm a happiness researcher. I love my job. But when we're doing too much work, we may end up kind of blocking out some of that time that we could otherwise use for fun. So I think for some of us, it's sort of a call to think about rebalancing the way we spend our time.
And so we need to rebalance these ingredients to have a little bit more fun. Before we get into how to do that, though, I want to make the case that fun matters. Right now, we're at this festival that's focused on like big geopolitical threats. I think there's another conversation going on about like the singularity and AI. By the time this session's over, the AI is going to take over, so it might be moot anyway. But there's sessions this morning about universities and rebuilding social trust. Like, we're talking about big issues here. And so you might wonder why Aspen would focus on a seemingly frivolous topic like fun. And so I want, Catherine, you to make the case that fun is a serious topic. It's still important to be talking about something like fun at a place that cares about these big issues. Why is fun such an important and such a serious topic?
I'm glad you asked that question, Lori, because it's really true. People tend to think it's frivolous. When we think of fun, we tend to think of it as being childish and like it should be at the bottom of the priority list. But I encourage everyone in the room to actually think to yourself of a memory that stands out in your own mind as having been really fun. Don't be horrified if it takes a minute to get one of those. It often does for adults. And also to share that story with someone at this festival, maybe even after this session is over. And just notice what it does to your mood and your energy level to just think about and share this past fun memory. Because I think that that is one of the many things that fun does for us and one of the many reasons that it is not frivolous. So if you back up for a second, it's very difficult to concretely identify how fun is good for us because, as I said, there's no research on fun. There's lots of research on playfulness and connection and flow, though. So if you buy my definition of that, you can see that there's actually a lot of evidence there. So one thing that it does for us is this energy boost. The world is really exhausting. Adult life is really exhausting. Our to-do lists are never ending. So if you can do something that's actually going to boost your mood and give you energy, that's going to help you go through your own life feeling better and also give you the energy to be a better person to whoever you're living with, to whoever you're working with, and also give you energy to try to solve some of the problems, which I know you're going to talk about, Liz, is how you can actually harness this power of fun to work on serious things. I would also say that it really has the power to unite us. And I think that's extremely important when we're living in such a polarized world where it just seems like everything is us versus them. If you think about some of your past fun experiences, even momentary small things that were fun, like dancing at a wedding with someone you didn't know or someone's strange relative that you never would have interacted with otherwise. You can see that it really erases differences. You actually don't see people as political parties when you're having fun and laughing together. You don't see them as different races or nationalities or religions. So if you can have more moments of playful, connected flow with someone, you're going to see them and connect with them on a much more human level, and that, again, makes it easier to solve serious problems. I'd also say another thing. I'm not going to go on about the benefits of fun, but one that really stood out to me that's very much tied into the theme of loneliness and what to do about it is that we now know that being lonely and isolated really is bad for us physically, probably in part because it raises our level of cortisol, a major stress hormone that over time is not good for us. But if you think about the moments in which you have fun, they're moments in which you're relaxed and open and also socially connected. And that's the antidote to loneliness. Mm-hmm. So I personally really did come away from writing the book, which again, it was a professional attempt to solve a personal problem. I came away really thinking that the way to be happy in the long run and the way to have the energy to be a better partner and to be a better parent and just do good in the world is to make sure that I and we are having enough fun.
So fun's super important, going to solve all the problems that the other 10s are talking about.
All the problems.
But now we have to ask, how do we get there? And I think when we think about how to get more fun, for me, as I think about this, I have to think very personally about what are some of my barriers to fun. What prevents me from getting more social time, like more playful, connected flow? And one of my biggest barriers is something that I know you've both written about a lot, which is that I'm too busy. I have a grind. I respect efficiency. I'm trying to fit so much work into my day that it just feels like I simply don't have time for this playful, connected flow. And Liz, I know you and your former students have talked a lot about the importance of valuing time, and specifically this concept that gets so much traction on my podcast, this idea of time affluence. What is time affluence, and why does it matter so much, and particularly if you're having more fun?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, time affluence refers to having enough time to do the things that are important to you. And interestingly, as people become wealthier, more material affluent, they actually seem to become less time affluent. So there seems to be a kind of dynamic trade-off between material affluence on the one hand and time affluence on the other. And material affluence does matter for happiness, but so too does time affluence. And one thing we've discovered is that there are really substantial individual differences in the ways that people think about time versus money and make these trade-offs. And of course, this is a complex issue, but we've found we can actually get a little bit of a crystal ball into people's futures by asking them one very simple question about how they sort of navigate trade-offs between time and money. And in one recent study, we asked students who are about to graduate from the University of British Columbia whether they basically prioritized time or prioritized money. And then we followed them. So we followed them for a couple years after they graduated. And what we discovered was that students who prioritized time over money during their last year at university actually ended up happier a couple years after graduating. And when we dug into the data, what we discovered was that students who had really prioritized time were more likely to pursue grad school or a career, a job that they found inherently enjoyable and fun. And so they ended up happier. And so there's this kind of pathway that we see between creating time for yourself to be able to pursue the things you actually find fun that really do have these consequential effects on our overall happiness.
And then, Catherine, you also have talked a lot about time and the misconceptions we have about time and fun. So,
yeah, I think what I would add to that is that it is very important for us as busy adults to prioritize fun. And I know I was mentioning this before, but it's too easy for fun to just end up at the bottom of the list. I mean, I am notorious for my to-do list. It's so satisfying to check something off the to-do list. So one suggestion I would have is to actually make a point of identifying what I call your fun magnets. And those are the people, the activities, and the settings that attract this feeling of fun to you personally. And we all have different collections of them, and yours may not be the same as the person you live with, which is also important.
You might not like the inflatable.
They might not like singing along with me and Lori, and I don't understand them. Anyway, but if you come up with this list of your fun magnets, you now have a set of activities and people and settings that you can prioritize in your busy life, and that if you do have some time affluence, you can choose to spend on. So that's kind of a way to make space for fun and engineer it to a certain degree, because it's not the case that you're going to always have like maximum fun doing this activity that you love. Like even the most fun activities for you personally, there's a varying degree of fun that can come out of that. You know, if you have a dinner with a friend and one time you're laughing uproariously and the next time it's like, meh, you know what I mean. But at least you'll have a better chance than if you're just continuing to try to do your to-do list for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day. And the other thing I would say is that you also need to make room for spontaneous fun and finding moments in your pre-existing life to incorporate a little bit more playfulness, a little bit more connection, a little bit more flow. And that's something you can do no matter what you're doing. You can do it in the middle of a work meeting, you know, by making a joke with a friend or a colleague. You can do it by putting down your phone and connecting with the person who's serving you coffee or saying hello to someone, you know, whoever's delivering your mail. Little moments, and those really do add up. So I think you can carve out time for more fun and put your fun magnets in those. You can also look up from your phone and just notice more opportunities for playfulness, connection, or flow.
And that is a nice transition to one of my second barriers to fun, which is my phone. In theory, my phone should help me with fun. I should be able to, I don't know, play video games with friends or do something. But instead, it winds up just being a horrible distraction. Catherine, you had this lovely quote in your book where you talk about that distraction is kryptonite to fun. Explain why that is.
Well, if you believe my definition of playful connected flow, flow is a state of being totally engaged and present. anything that kicks you out of that state of flow, anything that distracts you rather, is going to kick you out of flow. And if you're not in flow, you're not going to be able to truly have fun. And we've all had that experience where you're, for example, out to dinner and you are laughing, but then someone gets a text and they reach for their phone and suddenly that moment is broken. So I would really say that that is the main reason why distraction in our why our phones are kryptonite to fun, is that they're constantly distracting us and they're constantly taking us out of our present experience and taking us away from the people we're with, whether it's our friends or our children or our colleagues, and taking us somewhere else. And you just can't have fun if you're trying to be in two places at once.
And I think this is something we know from our lived experience, but I think understanding the science of how it works can make it even more compelling. And Liz, you've done this really excellent work just showing the subtle ways that our phones steal our attention, and particularly steal our attention for one of these components of fun, which is kind of this connected part. Tell me about some of these studies. I find them very depressing, but very interesting, important and interesting.
Depress us, Liz.
Yeah. Well, first, let me just say, I don't think smartphones are the root of all evil and that they're responsible for all our problems, and if we got rid of them, everything would be fine. I think that's a simplified view. And I say that as someone whose research is cited in defense of that view. But our research does clearly suggest that smartphones can take away from the pleasure of being with other people. And so, for example, in one study, we basically took over a table at a local restaurant for about 6 months. And every night, we would bring in a different group of friends and family to have dinner together on our tab. And we just had one simple manipulation that we did. Basically, by the flip of a coin, we either assigned everybody at the table to have their phones out and available or to put their phones away. Now, importantly, we just sort of mentioned this casually, embedded among some other housekeeping details of the study. And this is really important because people have very powerful theories about how phones affect each other, affect themselves. So we didn't want those theories on the table. We wanted just to see what happened when we actually changed this. And what we discovered was, first of all, as Catherine mentioned, people felt significantly more distracted when they had their phones out and available during dinner. And what was interesting about this is they weren't on their phones that much. It wasn't like that stereotypical image of 4 teenagers just sitting on their, it wasn't that often that they were on their phones. But still, it was enough to create this form of distraction. And we saw that at the end of the meal, again, people didn't know this study had anything to do with phone use, but at the end of the meal, groups who had had their phones out and available rated the whole experience of dining with their friends and family as less enjoyable compared to those who simply had been told to put their phones away. And perhaps most interestingly, and again, kind of surprisingly, but tying in with what Lori suggested, is that people reported being more bored when they had access to their phones. And again, our theory about this is that people are sort of slipping out of that moment and losing the flow, as Catherine has highlighted, of being in that conversation so that it just doesn't feel as interesting. Now, we also videotape people. So if you ever get invited to have dinner on my tab, be aware you're probably being videotaped. And I'm probably manipulating something you're not aware of. But when we went back and coded these videotapes, what we could see was that phone use was contagious. So when one person used their phone, other people use their phone. And so actually, you don't even have to be like scoldy with people. Just putting away your own phone at dinner and not touching it will have ripple effects and will make the whole experience more fun for everybody. So that would be a good practical challenge for everyone in the fun tent who's missing out on the singularity issue. Like, let's put our phones away and see what we can do to create fun at these meals.
Yeah, there's snap for that one. Catherine, you have this whole book on how to break up with your phone, which I think is mistaken. I think people assume that you're going to compel people to break up with their phones, but I really take your book as sort of couples counseling for the phone. You don't have to break up with it yet, but give it some a little help there. Any other ideas beyond what Liz suggested for how to do this better?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I do think you should break up with your phone in the sense of it's not a good relationship right now. I mean, if you think it's not a good relationship, you do you. But then find a better relationship that can involve your phone. And as Liz was just alluding to, I don't think any of us are anti-tech as a bottom line. You could plan that dinner by calling or texting your friends. It's just use it as a tool. So there are lots of tips and tricks out there you probably have heard that are effective, like grayscale or reducing your notifications, or please redesign your home screen so that it only contains apps that are tools and not temptations for you. But I personally think it's important to start from a higher level or a level back that's more philosophical, which is that we only have so many hours in the day, we only have so many days in a year and so many years in our lives, and we need to decide how we want to spend them. Many of the most time-sucking apps on our phones are time-sucking because they've been designed to steal our attention from us. But that's really our most valuable resource. If you spend time with someone, as Liz is just saying, but you're on your phone, you're not really fully together. You're together when you're paying attention to each other. So the thing that really stuck with me after writing How to Break Up with Your Phone was a question I also encourage you to ask yourselves repeatedly, which is, what do you want to pay attention to? What is important for you to pay attention to? Because if you don't make that decision, there's a company out there that's going to make it for you. And that's not to say that you won't necessarily decide that you want to pay attention to your phone in a particular minute, but the point is to make it a choice, not the default, and not because you've been manipulated. And I do have a technique that I can offer you that I've shared with Lori before called WWW, which is short for what for, why now, what else, that you can use if you notice yourself picking up with your phone. You might actually want to put a rubber band or a hair tie on your phone for a couple days just so you notice, because we all pick them up on autopilot, and you might end up with 30 minutes has gone by, and they're like, oh shoot, I was supposed to do that exercise. So put a hair tie on it, then you're like, why is there a rubber band on my phone? Oh, I'm supposed to do this thing. The first W is what for? What did you pick up your phone for? Did you have a purpose in this moment? Because you might have been calling those friends or texting them to get together for dinner or buying a specific thing, sending a specific email. But you also might find that you didn't really have a specific purpose. Then the next step is why now? What about this moment led you to reach for your phone? There might, again, be an actual specific time-sensitive reason, but in many cases it's going to be emotional. You're going to recognize there was a moment of boredom, or you're with a friend and they pulled out their phone, or you're working and you want a distraction, or you're a little lonely and you're seeking connection. So this is something Charles Duhigg talks a lot about in The Power of Habit, but if you can identify the reward that your brain is after, you can figure out a different way to give your brain that reward. And that leads to the third step. So you've got what for, why now, and then what else? What else could you do in that moment to give yourself that reward? Could you actually call a friend instead of turning to social media for connection? Because we all know that doesn't really work. Can you take a break from work by going for a little walk instead of just scrolling through the news, which also is not going to make you feel better? And then I'd also say that you might decide that you don't want to do anything. And speaking to the idea of boredom and the value of boredom and empty space in our minds, you might decide that just staring at a wall, or as I often do in Ubers, like staring out the window at a cloud, is actually what you want to be doing. Just don't be alarmed if the driver asks you if you're okay, which is something that's happened to me multiple times. I'm like, oh, but I'm just looking at a cloud. And the last thing I would say is you could answer the what else, as I was alluding to before, by saying, I actually want to be looking at my phone right now, even if it's for something as mindless as scrolling through social media. But again, if you can just get better control over your attention, it's going to make a big difference in how you experience your life, because what we pay attention to in the moment is really a decision about how we're going to live our lives more broadly.
And I just want to plus one to that WWW technique. This is one that I teach my students in my happiness class at Yale, and it's one of the techniques that they love the most, especially that what else question, because it's an opportunity cost question, right? Like, what else is important that I could be paying attention to right now? Super powerful. Maybe it's fun. Getting back to fun, so we had our barriers to fun. We had, I don't have any time, I'm super distracted, I'm on my phone all the time. Final barrier to fun, and this one gets back to what my students talk about a lot, is this idea that, like, right now, with the world as it is, we are not supposed to have fun. Like, you look out at what all these other tents are talking about here, and you're like, they're a big problem. Like, how can I be playful when the world is on fire? How can I, like, be having fun, like, in this connected way when, like, politics is falling apart all around me, when there's, like, wars everywhere? And I think this is something that comes up a lot. And I think there's lots of reasons to recognize that this is a misconception, that during the tough times in the world and for yourself, this might be exactly the time where you really, really want to have fun. Interestingly, because making sure you're feeling good, feeling happier, might be connected to solving some of these interesting problems. And Liz, your whole new book is actually arguing that we can use fun and happiness and focusing on our joy to fix the climate crisis, which is definitely not something I was expected. I know you're going to figure out how we can harness our time and our money to feel happier, but not how we can harness, like, carbon to feel happier. So given that it's such an unusual notion, explain what you mean and give me some examples of how we can fight climate change through fun.
Yeah, so as Catherine said, fun is energizing, and any social movement needs energy. Any social movement, I think, needs fun, it needs joy, and I think the climate movement has been starved of it. So, when we're in a good mood, we tend to be better at thinking of creative, novel solutions, which is, of course, what we need at this moment. And if we can make changes in our own lives that we actually enjoy, it is so much easier to stick with them than if we are just pursuing self-sacrifice. So in our book, we kind of chart this through every domain of life, from work and commuting to major life decisions like whether to have kids and where to live. But since this is a session on fun, I'm going to focus on vacation, and then I'll just touch on voting as well. So let's talk about vacation. So as a happiness researcher, I want people to have a great time. Vacations are wonderful, but like the first thing you learn about climate change is that flights are terrible, right? Like flying is incredibly carbon intensive activity. So how can we enjoy vacation and keep our carbon footprint low? Well, interestingly, I got some insight on this from a really cool study by a Dutch researcher who went around to all kinds of different tourist attractions and surveyed tourists. And he wanted to figure out, like, what's the tourist activity that brings people the greatest joy? And basically, the first sort of look at the data said, it doesn't really matter, like whether people are eating or shopping or visiting a historical monument or a museum, they're having a great time. Like all these different things seem to put people in a good mood. The one exception was if most of their day had been spent on travel. That sucked out the joy of tourism. So what that tells us is that there's potentially an opportunity to think about taking at least some of our vacations closer to home, maybe even being a hometown tourist. And interestingly, there's data showing that people rarely visit the tourist attractions that bring other people to their own region. In fact, the most likely times for people to visit their hometown tourist attractions, maybe you can guess in your head, are one, when people have visitors from out of town, and two, when they themselves are about to move away. So because these attractions are always there, we don't take advantage of them. And so this just being a hometown tourist is a great way to sort of capitalize on the pleasures of tourism while having an incredibly low carbon footprint. Now, that doesn't mean never go to Aspen, which is amazing, but when you do it, really think about making it a treat and thinking carefully about what I call the return on emissions. Like, are you getting enough joy and connection out of this experience? So I used to fly in and out quickly for talks, and I was there and then I was gone. Now I'm like, how long can I possibly stay and enjoy this experience and meet everybody and I did the yoga this morning. It's like, do all the things, suck the most joy out of every pound of carbon you burn is sort of the key idea here. So that's vacation. And that's a small thing, it's an individual choice, but the same lens we can apply to more systemic problems too. So if we think about voting, it turns out happier people are more likely to vote. Education is one of the best predictors of voting, but life satisfaction is actually just as strong as education. And I'm someone, I've done like phone banking for elections. It's not that fun. You're talking to a lot of people that don't want to talk to you. And field experiments actually show it is less effective to do phone banking than to host a party near a polling place. So bringing the joy, bringing the fun actually might be more effective than some of these traditional strategies that we look to change the world.
Can I add one example to that? You just made me think of like an actual example of that. I live in Philadelphia, and they had a get out the vote party put on by Daybreaker, which is this organization that does early morning sober dance parties, right by City Hall. They had this DJ with incredibly loud music, pole dancers, like with thongs. I mean, there's a whole thing. And Bill Nye the Science Guy. And he talked about the Constitution. And everybody danced, and I saw the pole dancers taking pictures of Bill Nye's Science Guy, and then they marched everybody over to City Hall to register to vote. So
yes, beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, the power here is that when we think about all these problems that all the other TEDs are talking about, we think that the only way to solve them is by making ourselves miserable and to look at but I think what we're really hearing here with climate and with so many other things is like, if we figure out ways that we can get in the ingredients of fun and ingredients of happiness in solving these things, maybe we'd be better off. One of those ingredients might be coming to Aspen to talk about these horrible problems in a beautiful space, so we'll see. Okay, so now in the few moments we have left before I open up to your questions, and we are gonna ask questions, so be thinking about them in just a second, just a couple more minutes. We wanna talk about what we can do to solve this. We heard lots of things we can do to fix our distractions, deal with our phone betters. But since we're here at Aspen, lots of relatively high net worth people, we're not gonna call you out, but we see you. We also wanna talk about how we can use our money to get more fun. And Liz, you wrote a whole book called Happy Money about this. What are some quick tips we could do to get better about spending our money in ways that are actually going to deliver on fun?
Well, I think one thing is, I talked before about the importance of time affluence, and our research has shown that people who use money to buy time by buying their way out of their dreaded tasks are happier than those who do not. But one way, when I share this research with people, one thing they say is, yeah, okay, you buy time, but then you kind of get used to that extra time, and it just gets folded into, it's just, you get to item 11 instead of item 10 of your to-do list. And so what I would say is like a cool, I haven't demonstrated this scientifically, but I do it in my own life, is to buy that time and then really link it to like something fun that you want to be able to do. So, the annoying thing you have to do once a month on Saturdays, if you could buy your way out of it and then think of like, what's the really fun thing you could do during that Saturday instead, and commit to making that direct linkage.
Can I give my example that I've done since knowing Liz's work about this? Now, every time I get takeout, especially the takeout that comes on a day when you're like just really exhausted and you just like can't even in the kitchen, and you buy that takeout, I put a timestamp on that takeout. I just bought pad thai. If I tried to cook pad thai myself, that'd be like an hour and a half, like at least 2 hours. What am I gonna do with that 2 hours, right? Just that, I was gonna buy the pad thai anyway, but that little shift can let me use that time a little bit more wisely. Catherine, I know you've talked about a misconception that we have when it comes to time and fun, that like fun really requires lots and lots of hours of time. You got to spend a whole week at Aspen to get any fun. What's wrong with that idea when it comes to how people really engage with fun?
Yeah, you don't need that much time or money, although I will say what you both said ties in perfectly to the idea. If you figure out how much your pad thai is worth in time, and you figure out those fun magnets we were talking about, that's when you put this all together and you say, okay, on Saturday, I'm going to carve out my pad thai 2 hours or whatever to do that thing I identified. So I like that idea. I'm going to try to do that myself, because that also plays mental games with yourself where you're like, yes, I've justified it to myself more. Sorry, I'm working through my own issues.
Yeah, no.
Anyway.
All research is me search, folks. We're just working things out of here. Okay, so
you don't need lots of time or money. And I would say for the money part, one of my favorite stories that someone shared with me when I was doing research for my book is how he had a ton of fun sitting on a park bench with his nephew, just catching leaves, trying to catch leaves as they fell off a tree. And I thought that was so beautiful. It's obviously free. And I was like, you're actually making, because I like to say, there's opportunities for fun floating around us in the air all the time. We just have to reach out and grab them. And I'm like, you just made that literal. Thank you so much, Joe, that guy who told me that story. But you also don't need that much time. I mean, you should carve out the time on your calendar for those things. But as we were talking about before, you also can just find these little moments, these little interstitial moments where you can do something that's a little bit playful. An example, in my own house, we have something called a 30-second dance party timer that my husband got me as a gag gift. It has a German accent, and it says 30-second dance party, and then it gives you 30. Anyway, something like that, literally 30 seconds, that elevates the mood, and if we're in kind of like let's say a fight with our 11-year-old daughter, it also, breaks the tension. So you can just do little things throughout the day to add a bit of levity and add a bit of connection that really can make a difference, even if it's not a whole 2-hour pad thai block.
My 30-second dance party, stolen from Catherine again, because these are, of course, my gurus for happiness and fun, was that when she told me about this, I was like, I don't really have this, German 30-second dance party thing. But at the time, I had an old PlayStation that was still hooked up, and we had Guitar Hero. And I realized that the songs I like to play most on Guitar Hero are at most like 2 minutes for like that Motley Crue song or whatever. And so in between Zoom meetings, I would when I'm working from home, leave 5 minutes at the end to run to my room, put on the Motley Crue, play the Motley Crue, and then just go to the next Zoom meeting. And what's crazy is what else would I have done with those 5 minutes? I would have checked off some stupid email. I would have scrolled through something stupid on Facebook or Instagram. Now I come back energized. I come to that meeting. I'm like, kickstart my heart, people. Let's talk about the spreadsheet. Anyway, in our last 2 minutes, in our last 2 minutes before we turn away, in part because we've been talking about making fun of the other tents, talking about geopolitical crises and AI. Another thing that everybody's talking about is loneliness and connection. And both of your ingredients to happiness included connection, which we're getting less and less of these days. Quick, fast tip on your best advice for how we all in this tent can get a little bit more connection. Catherine, you want to start?
Well, put down your phones and talk to someone. And then I'd also say one of my favorite techniques is to notice and share delights, which is, I talked about this last time I was at Aspen, so I may be saying this again to some of you. It's a practice I got from the poet Ross Gay, who wrote a whole book called The Book of Delights. The basic idea is just make a point of noticing things in your environment or your interactions that delight you. And when you notice those things, you put a finger up in the air and you say out loud, delight. And so I'd like to invite you to do that with me on 3. You'll feel silly the first time, but there's actually scientific evidence showing that noticing and naming positive things, saying it out loud, accompanying it with a physical gesture, and then sharing it with other people is a way to boost your mood. So count of 3, ready? 1, 2, 3. Delight. Thank you. And you can do that for yourself alone. You can share it with other people. We have a jar of delights on our kitchen table we drop delights into. And if you're like, I don't know about this delight thing, another quick tip I would have is create delight for other people. Like, for example, I went through a phase, speaking of little things you can give people, to just create delight for others by, in my case, buying a number of $9.99 portable disco balls off of Amazon and sending them to friends with no explanation.
I love it. So awesome.
It's good to get on her mailing list. Liz, 30-second, how can we increase connection?
All right, so I'm going to do two. One is like planned fun. So I calendar my fun, which maybe doesn't reflect well on me, but actually it works so well because, for example, I have a friend who is like the busiest person I know, and so I wasn't seeing her, and so we committed to doing this fitness class together every week, and I literally just booked a flight around not missing that class. And so we make sure we see each other, and she's one of my favorite people in the world, and we actually get that hour together every week. The other bit is more serendipitous, and that is similar to what Catherine was saying, but talking to strangers. So my research has shown that when people even a brief chat with someone they don't know, it actually lifts both people's moods. And so I would invite all of you, as we're leaving here today, to maybe just talk to somebody else that you haven't met before, say hello. And what's really interesting about this is we actually underestimate other people's interest in talking to us. And I think one of the beautiful part of the sort of secret sauce of Aspen Ideas is that people do talk to each other in a way that we don't out in the rest of the world. So practice it here and then take it home with you to your own community.
Yeah. Well, we have given you lots of insight about how to fight the barriers of fun, but now we want to hear your questions. We have our Mike, who's going to be running around. Let me see your hands. Maybe do one in the front right here.
So I'm wondering if one of you or some of your colleagues have ever done research on whether certain brains are more predisposed to have fun. Or for example, if you're somebody who suffers from anxiety or OCD or something like that, if that creates a barrier.
Do you want to take? Or so there are definitely some different predispositions in people. The ease with people get one of those ingredients, which is connection, right? Introversion, extroversion. But one of the things we now know from great work on these personality traits is that introversion is much less of a actual thing about you, like, oh my gosh, I just don't like social connection. It's a lot about how you think about your own social connection. And it gets back to the point that Catherine was making in her surveys where people said, when I'm thinking about all my fun magnets, I'm just an introvert, but every time I look at when I had fun, it was with another person. And work by Sonia Lubomirsky and others have found that we kind of are off in our estimation. So if you think of yourself as an introvert, and that might be one of the factors that prevent you from getting this kind of connected, playful flow, just push yourself. She finds that if you just try it out a little bit, it has more benefits than you expect. So that would be the one that I'd worry about the most.
Yeah, and I would say also that oftentimes we don't do things because we're worried about them, but the way to get over that is to do them. And once you start to get over your social anxiety and try it, and it wasn't so bad, that reinforces your ability to go out and do more stuff. And that typically feels good, and that makes you want to do it more. And I also would say I think that anxiety is a barrier to fun, and I think that gets at the playfulness aspect because there is the requirement to let down your guard a bit. And so if you are feeling anxious or if you're constantly worried about what other people are thinking of you or they're going to judge you, which is one reason I think that social media is also very destructive to fun, it's going to be really hard. So whatever you can do to reduce your anxiety, put yourself in situations where you can say, what's the worst that can happen? Or just ask yourself that question, and stop looking at other people's thoughts and reactions and go out and try stuff. And the more you try and more you do, the more fun you have, the more you're going to be motivated to have more of it.
Yeah, and I would just say, too, maybe you haven't found your right kind of fun yet. So these guys are really excited about having a sing-along. I got kicked out of chorus in 7th grade for throwing the other kids off tune. So to me, a sing-along is very anxiety-provoking. But again, finding the thing that's right for you, I think, is, and finding the people, as you said, the fun magnets that actually can get you there because all of us are capable of fun.
That's so important because people think, I have to love parties or amusement parks or clowns or something like that. You don't. You need to find your fun. Don't let other people tell you what your fun is.
And I think, I think Catherine's work so nicely shows that you need to kind of do some time to analyze it. You don't love this phrase, but in your book you talk about doing a fun audit, which sounds super not fun. It's not that kind of audit, folks. But it's really taking time to think about your fun magnets. When was the last time you had real fun? Who was with you? What were you doing? You might get some surprises. When Catherine and I first did this, she worked with me to do this on my podcast. I realized that it actually did involve music. I never thought of myself as a musical person, but then I was like, oh wait, everything on my list that was fun had some dancing or music. Maybe I need to build that in more. So analyzing it, as nerdy as that sounds, can be really powerful. Okay, next question up.
Yes, why would you get an AI? Wow.
Yeah, but
Hello.
yeah,
Hello.
we got you. Yeah.
Hello.
He's ready.
He's ready. We'll let you know when it is. Don't worry.
An AI bracelet. Why would you get it? How many people would here have it? What's the purpose? What's the advantage of that?
Of an AI bracelet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
We
don't
heard
know.
about, I think this was from maybe the other AI session where folks were
okay.
talking about getting data. I think this ties into fun in an interesting way, right? Which is that there are lots of tools out there that give us information about so many different states, right? Like how stressed we are, whether we're maybe even in a state of flow, if we're paying attention, we haven't gotten sleep and so on. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of tools that tell us about playfulness and connection and flow. I actually think, honestly, if Aura would put in something that was you haven't connected with a person in a day, or you've been thinking about work, you haven't thought about a playful thing for weeks and weeks, we might get more of it. And so I think the reason folks get these tools is to get data on them. Maybe. I think we need to think about, I think it would be, one great thing is we have introspection to think about our playful, connected flow, and just taking time to analyze your own can be really helpful. I don't know if you guys.
Also, just notice when you laugh. That's a telltale sign that doesn't require an Aura ring.
Yeah.
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 I actually have a whole line of research on AI and happiness and connection, so come 410 today. Come check that out.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do it.
Follow up with Liz. She'll clear
Yeah.
up all the AI stuff after this. Other questions? Maybe we'll get one way in the back. Yeah.
Hi, I feel so lucky that I'm a choreographer and I grew up dancing.
Ooh,
I'm
yeah.
wondering about the role of arts and physical in public school or in education K through 12, and because I just hear more often that it's dwindling.
You guys want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that we totally underestimate the power of fun when it comes to education, whether it's through music or art or just a teacher who makes you laugh. And I encourage everyone to think about your favorite teacher from your own life. Probably you had fun in their class. We are in a very open state, a very attentive state. We're fully present and focused when we're having fun, and that's the best way to learn. And if you have experiences, you're more likely to have fun and also to learn. So I think it's a big mistake to be focusing too much on test scores and taking opportunities for kids to socialize and be with each other out of schools. I also think it's one of the reasons that the new movement towards phone-free schools, not phone bans, but phone-free schools is so wonderful, especially if they're bell to bell, where kids don't have their devices out during lunch or recess, because those are the moments where you get to joke around with your friend, and actually share a laugh or do something. I hear from lots of teachers and administrators who say, I can't believe how loud the lunchroom is now, how loud the hallways are, because previously everyone was just staring at phones. I'm sure that you could speak to students just sitting there in silence before class instead of interacting with each other. So yeah, I think we learn best when we're having fun.
I think I'll just add to that too, kind of one thing that often happens in schools, this is true for I think arts and music, but in lots of different subjects, for me, science, is that we turn something that used to be playful into something that's no longer playful, right? So I like science, oh, you're gonna be a great scientist someday, you should really work for your science grades, but worse, I think for art and music, sports, the things we love that are enjoyable for us, we do for play, we turn them into work. And I think that's very dangerous for all of us, the adults in this room, but it's especially dangerous for kids. I'm obsessed with reading the memoirs of good actors and sports heroes, and so many of them say the thing that I loved. Andre Agassi is a great example of this. He got into tennis because he loved tennis. He's like, now I hate tennis. It stopped being fun, right? Wow. And that's a real danger for all of us. That playfulness ingredient sounds like we talked a lot about the flow part and the connected part, but the playfulness part is so important. You need to find a way to hold on to it just because it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I'll add one thing I've done in my own classes that I teach at the University of British Columbia is I've tried to get, obviously I have to grade students on some things, but I have them do a lot of activities in class, sort of team-based competitions sometimes. And if they're 4 grades, students get this mean, hungry look in their eyes, and I have to like deal with, complaints and blah, blah, blah. So what I did was created Psychology Gold, where I give them gold that they can earn for winning these competitions. And then at the end of the semester, we have an auction, and I put in some prizes that include like donations to charity, having lunch with me, things like that. But then the students also bring in prizes. And so they actually, and that's really where the magic happens, is that like there's every little weird cactus and things that like, your students have brought in condoms, sourdough bread, like it's everything all up there on the table. It's everything they worked for all term. But it's like enough, I think sometimes with playfulness, we need a little bit of motivation to get us going. So that gold is enough to motivate them without making it sad, without making it about this extrinsic reward like grades. And I think looking for those psychology gold opportunities in other parts of our life is a really fun thing to pursue. I love that.
So I hope that we've all given you some gold opportunities to have more fun here at Aspen. Can we get a shout out for our amazing panel, Catherine and Liz? And we don't know for sure, but there's some chance the Aspen folks will let us do a pop-up sing-along. So if you see me and Catherine under some tent screaming to Bon Jovi, please join in. We will
Probably
enjoy that
tomorrow
so much.
night. This is how we bonded. You'll like it.
Thank you all so much.